So after checking out WWE WrestleMania 18 and 19, along with the First Day of Reckoning game, that only leaves one more WWE GameCube exclusive to check out. Will this one continue the trend of improvements from what we've seen in the previous titles? Or has the WWE GameCube exclusives already reached its peak? Let's find out as we take a look at WWE Day of Reckoning 2 for the GameCube. I hope you enjoy. WWE Day of Reckoning 2 was released in the month of August 2005, developed by Yuke's and published by THQ. I have not played this game in like 19 years or something, so I can barely remember a thing about it if I'm honest. I do remember as much as I enjoyed this game, I didn't play it as nearly enough as I did the First Day of Reckoning. I did enjoy the First Day of Reckoning game, but I always seen it as a nice little fix to get me through until the first WWE SmackDown vs Raw game hit the shelves over on the PlayStation 2. I was absolutely hooked on the first SVR game. So much so, by the time Day of Reckoning 2 came out, I hardly really played it. I was only interested in it when I needed a little breather from SVR, which was rare at the time. However, I do remember having a blast with it. I completed the story mode, unlocked everything that was available, and then it was just completely forgotten about. It wasn't like the SmackDown games on the PS2 that I would still frequent from time to time for either enjoyment or a dose of nostalgia. I'm genuinely looking forward to giving this another bash for the channel and see if it still holds up. The intro package for this is still fantastic. It's one aspect from the real life product that always seemed to translate well into the games at the time. Intense music, with some spoken word over the top along with footage from the game. Simple, but effective. What's not to love? I do like the menus in this game. That's one thing I faulted the previous title for, which I understand if you're creating a new series outside of the mainline games, it's hard to find your identity for them. But I feel more thought has been put into this one. Big shots of an arena, and as you dive further into the menus you get closer to the arena and inside it. You can even go into the production trucks and you'll be greeted with an actual GameCube on the desk whilst you save your progress. The final phase of these menus is when you select a superstar, and whatever arena you choose will then be the backdrop whilst you pick your superstar. While on the subject, let's talk about the game's roster. Day of Reckoning 2 has 43 playable characters once everything is unlocked, a slight upgrade from the previous game's 40. I've got to say, I like the presentation of the roster much better in this game. In fact, probably the best out of the 4 GameCube exclusive I visited this far. You get a nice render of the superstar you're hovering over and their overall rating, and with a press of the X button on the controller, this brings up their profile. Here you can view their attributes along with what their special move is. I believe by the time this game's released, the actual WWE roster itself was a lot better and it's reflected well in here in game. We of course have our usual suspects from this time along with a load of first timers for WWE games, and some now that when I look back, were key components in what made the Ruthless Aggression era so entertaining and fun to watch. We see first time inclusions here with the likes of Heidenreich, Orlando Jordan and Paul London, which I must mention if you haven't already, check out podcast appearances this guy makes. He's got some incredible stories from this era and seems like a genuinely sound bloke. Gene Snitsky also makes his first appearance in a WWE game along with Kenzo Suzuki, which until now I completely forgot about him. And that makes sense too, because it is usually these games which helps me remind me of certain superstars from different eras, and I can't remember him from any other game, and that's because this is the only WWE game to feature him. So yeah, if we have any die-hard Kenzo fans out there, this is the only place you'll get to play him as. We also get Carlito, Chris Masters and Muhammad Hassan as playable characters for the first time. And when I think of the Ruthless Aggression era outside of the obvious picks, these 3 usually spring to mind first. I remember seeing Carlito for the first time in those funny vignettes that featured on TV before he made his official debut. I remember everyone in school thinking he was the coolest guy in the world, and it didn't take long for someone in my class to get an apple spat in their face for not being cool. Next up, the masterpiece, Chris Masters. I know he's spoken publicly over the years in interviews and podcasts etc, but how the hell did this man not get a chance at a title run? For me, he was the total package. His entrance was fantastic and his theme song was top tier as well. His Master Lock challenge was entertaining to watch, and at the time I absolutely hated him, but as I got older I realised that's what made him great. He was a proper heel, and by me hating him, he was doing his job right. Just a shame we never got to see him hold the World Heavyweight title, because I think he would have had a good run. I'm also glad to see he's still wrestling to this day, and is still in great shape. Last up is my favourite addition, and maybe the most controversial superstar of all time, Muhammad Hassan. Now of course when you're younger you appreciate the good guys, but see when you've grown up and rewatched the old stuff, I can't help but love the heels, and my god, Hassan has got to be one of the greatest. This wasn't that long after the 9/11 tragedy, so it was fresh on the mind for a lot of people, but when he first came in he was speaking some truths, to be fair. Obviously they took it to an extreme when they actually turned him into a terrorist, but I don't think a single wrestler has had as much heat with the crowd since him. The funniest part about it though is that he is actually Italian, another guy I'm incredibly happy to hear is doing great in life. In terms of divas, we get one new first timer with the inclusion of Christy Hemme. We also have Stacy Keibler, Tori Wilson and Trish Stratus accompanying her, giving us a total of 4 playable divas in the game. Unlockable superstars which fall under the Legends category include Mankind, Bret Hart, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan. Now I know by this point we had seen Mankind and The Rock feature as legends in the first SmackDown vs Raw game, but I remember it hitting me hard seeing Austin fall under that umbrella too now. It was a really weird time for me as a wrestling fan because even though I was young at the time, I was already beginning to feel nostalgic for the years that had just passed. Thankfully though, with some of the guys I previously mentioned like Masters, Carlito and Hassan, my love for the show started to grow again. But yeah, to gain access to these legends, a few requirements must be met, like complete 5 exhibition matches to unlock Austin, 10 for Mankind, and 20 for Bret Hart. As you go through the game's story mode, you'll unlock both The Rock and Hulk Hogan. I'll never forget seeing Austin's render shot here once I unlocked him. How badass is that? And they say Nintendo consoles are for kids? While we're looking at the footage here, I'm happy to report that the Legends have now finally got proper entrances along with the correct themes. Well, they took a slight liberty with Mankind's theme because it doesn't match the era that his attire depicts here, but I can let it slide. It's just nice to see Legends getting the full treatment compared to the previous WWE games, not just on the GameCube, but PlayStation 2 as well. While on the subject of entrances, this gives us a good chance to see the character models up close and personal, and I've got to say, this game is the best looking so far out of all the WWE games I've covered on the GameCube. It's hard to believe this is 20 years old now. Everyone comes out full of life and it's actually breathtaking to see how great these entrances actually are, even after all this time. A nice new addition to entrances is that we now have an announcer calling your name as you make your way down. This is done by Tony Chimmel. Whatever happened to him? If you guys haven't already, go check out the behind the scenes video of someone actually inside the ring hitting Tony in the nuts with a cannon that's shooting out t-shirts to the crowd. He completely loses it. Funny stuff. All stage designs look fantastic too, with the correct overlays displayed for each superstar whilst they make their way down to the ring. Just look at this entrance here with JBL. Nothing screams America more than having JBL come out with bullhorns attached to a limo with a Great American Bash stage as the backdrop. The entrances are top notch and some of the best I've seen in a WWE game. But let's move on to the gameplay now. Now I have already mentioned how great the graphics look, and I'm pleased to say this also translates very well into the gameplay too. The game does look fantastic and I found it hard to believe I'm looking at a game that's pretty much 20 years old now. I love the switch up in camera angles whilst pulling off different moves and the multiple replays you get when delivering a devastating finishing move on your opponent. It all looks good, but gameplay wise, I feel as if it's more or less the same as the previous game. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just that I don't think it's a giant leap forward in what we've seen in the other WWE games at the time. I'm not saying that there isn't anything new here because there are some new features added in this that I will now go over. First up is the stamina system, which I know for some players of WWE games at the time was a bit of a touchy subject. You either loved it or you hated it. A bit like Marmite. I must admit I wasn't the biggest fan when it came to the WWE games having a stamina system in it. It's a tough one because on one hand adding a stamina system brings a whole new level of realism into the games, an aspect that many of us take for granted, but on the other hand because of the realism of having such a system in place it can bring you to a grinding halt sometimes, which for me can take the fun out of these games a little. Even though I'm not a fan, I'll try and give it some justice for the ones who do like it. The more your stamina drops, the slower you become. Once it's completely drained, it leaves you winded and in a dazed state once you get back to your feet, making you completely open to attacks. This is the side of it I don't like. If your opponent is constantly on the attack, this leaves little room for you to regain stamina, so you may find yourself in an endless loop of being absolutely pummeled because you are completely winded at all times. Another reason why I don't like the stamina system in this game in particular is how you actually regain stamina. You literally just stand there. This is so boring. I can't remember what SmackDown vs Raw it was, but I remember at the very least in one of those you can hold the select button to regain stamina. In this, nothing. Just stand there. So draining. Or you could also jump in and out of the ring constantly while your opponent does the same. But is it even a wrestling game at this point if that's what you're doing? One way I do like to regain stamina on this, and is actually a good segue into another new feature I actually liked, and that is the different submission options we have on offer in this. Once you set yourself up to perform a submission move, 4 options flash up on screen. These are taunt, rest hold, drain, and submit, which can be chosen by pointing the C stick in the direction of which option you want to choose. If you choose taunt, this will deplete your opponent's momentum meter. A rest hold will allow your superstar to regain some stamina, the way I like to do it, seeing as you're actually still wrestling. A drain submission will drain your opponent's stamina, which does come in handy, and submit will just cause damage to whatever part of the body you're trying to cause more damage to. You may notice that both yourself and your opponent has the same options to choose from whilst in this state. This is because it gives either yourself or your opponent the chance to escape the hold. Say if you select submit, but your opponent selects taunt, whoever initiated the move will pull it off, but if you both select the same option, then whoever the move is being placed on will escape the move. I really like this take on submission moves if I'm honest. I welcome it with open arms. But back to the stamina system for a second. Fair play to the developers. They must have really liked this inclusion because they even doubled down with it by not letting you have the option to turn it off or on like the SVR game's done. Another new feature which also ties into the stamina system, and one I'm not sure I remember seeing in any WWE games around this time, and that is how blood is used in this. We've seen it all before in WWE games. Beat up your opponent and eventually you bust them open, but there is 3 different levels to bloodshed in this and how it affects you. These are mild, moderate and crimson mask. Each can easily be identified by how much blood is being shed. Mild to moderate are easy to recover from, but Crimson Mask can make it really hard to regain any kind of stamina. I feel if either yourself or your opponent gets to this stage, then it's an instant finish. There's 3 camera angles you can choose from, and believe it or not, the default camera angle has the crowd as the backdrop, which I just find incredibly boring to look at. Thankfully you can change it to front, which uses the stage for the backdrop for your matches, which I think looks a lot better and doesn't become as draining to look at. There is one weird angle called middle, which at first from the little picture in the options menu had me wondering how it would work, but surprisingly it works really well. It's a sort of isometric view much like the Fire Pro Wrestling games have. Every Irish whip I executed using this angle had my opponent going exactly where I intended them to go. I couldn't use this angle all the time, but it's a nice inclusion to keep the game fresh on the eyes. Money can now be earned through playing exhibition matches, but it made me wonder if this was a complaint from the previous game. You'd think everyone would have played the story mode, but maybe not. It's a nice inclusion anyway to keep that cash flow coming when you're not playing the game's story mode. So that's all the new stuff in this game. Some nice additions, don't get me wrong, but I'd have liked them to fix this issue I've had with all these games, and that's not being able to do grapple moves into weapons like ladders and tables whilst they are propped up against the turnbuckles. So yeah, that's the gameplay. If you played the previous game, this will be a walk in the park for you because it does everything the previous game done, but on a better scale I'd say. And the new additions are easy to grasp straight from the beginning. I can't help but feel it's just the exact same as the previous game though, and we haven't even covered the different match types yet. And guess what? Absolutely no new match types to choose from. That is just really disappointing, don't you think? Like, I love the gameplay in these Day of Reckoning games. I just would have liked to have seen what an elimination chamber would have been like in these. Anyway, no more on this section as I feel I've done it justice in the previous video. Let's check out the game's Create a Superstar mode. And once again we delve into the Create a Superstar mode before jumping into the game's story mode. And you know what that means? Yes, another story mode that can only be played out with a superstar you have made. Unfortunately, there is no way to transfer your previously made wrestler into this game, so you have to start fresh. Thankfully though, if you're like me and don't like to spend too much time in this feature, the game does throw some pre-made generic looking wrestlers at you to choose from if you'd prefer not to make your own. As I am reviewing the game as a whole to try and do some justice with it, I'll be making my own superstar from scratch, and much like the rest of the game I have already covered, it's a lot more of the same stuff here as we have seen in the previous game. Not a bad thing as I did enjoy this feature before, but once you are thrown pretty much the same thing as before, it gets a bit tedious, I'd say. Although there are a couple new things added that I did like. We now don't just get attribute points we can build up, but also skill points that reflect our skills with striking, grappling, mat technique, aerial attacks, and dirty tactics. Next to these skill points we also get an arsenal level, which when picking moves for your created wrestler will let us know if we can even use these moves or not. These secondary stats define which moves you can use and what you can't due to your arsenal level for each category, which makes the player seriously consider what kind of style you want your created superstar to have. You can be a bit of an all-rounder, but you may even see more pain and devastation dished out if you go all out as a grappler. I would honestly suggest boosting some of these new stats, as the moves that can be accessed through doing so are much better than the basic ones found through just upgrading your basic attributes. This is one thing I enjoyed whilst playing through the story mode. As I gained more points to spend, I was putting them into the skill branch to boost my arsenal level to gain access to these more powerful moves that can do some serious damage. More on attributes when I cover the actual story mode though, as you can find yourself in a sticky situation if you end up putting all your eggs in the one basket like I almost did. One thing that really annoyed me when creating my superstar here was the loading times take forever. I know this was an issue on the later WWE games on the PS2 as well, and another reason why I stayed away from the create a wrestler mode in them for the most part. This is ball-achingly brutal to sit through, especially if you make a mistake here like I did by somehow turning my guy completely black, instead of just his tattoos that I placed on him that I wanted to edit. So yeah, that's create a superstar. If you're familiar with the previous game, then you'll fit right in at home with this feature. Every aspect of your created wrestler can be altered and edited to your exact liking. A massive list of movesets to choose from, and for all different scenarios you may be in whilst in the ring. The create an entrance feature for me overshines the actual create a wrestler mode. It is more or less the same, but when you can make your entrance look like you're in Nam, then that's a complete bonus in my books, and I thoroughly enjoyed spending a bit of time on that. Speaking of time, as I don't want to be going on forever here, let's check out the game story mode. Now with the updates we did receive in the gameplay department, I bet you're all wondering how the story mode is in this. Let me tell you now, I really enjoyed my time going through this. First I'll talk about how the story mode itself kicks off, as I don't want to ruin the climax for anyone who hasn't experienced it for themselves. Then the upgrades to this game's story mode that I liked, along with some things that I didn't, as not everything is perfect unfortunately. So basically this game's story mode kind of picks up from where the last one finished. It's been a year and you're now no longer the champion. The World Heavyweight title becomes vacant due to a draw in a match between Jericho and Triple H. A tournament is then set up by Eric Bischoff, and the last two in it will compete at WrestleMania for the title. WrestleMania comes round and guess what? The title has gone missing, meaning no title match can take place, and then an investigation starts to find out who has stolen the title. That is basically the plot of the whole story throughout your playthrough, with a few diversions thrown in here and there. Oh, also, you now have Stacy Keibler as your girlfriend, which I will touch on shortly. So the first thing I noticed during my playthrough that I liked a lot was the writing for both the story itself and the dialogue for the wrestlers. I found the story incredibly engaging throughout, and found, unlike the previous game, that I wasn't constantly being put against or feuding with the same people for a long duration, which made the first game's story mode a bit stale at times. I felt as if I was constantly being involved in some sort of angle, which made it impossible to put the controller down at times. I could tell that the writers were either fans of WWE or the actual WWE writers themselves, because the dialogue for each wrestler was brilliantly done, even more so than the first Day of Reckoning, which I did praise that for. There was multiple backstage segments with different set designs to keep it fresh on the eyes. One minute you could be cutting a promo with Jonathan Coachman, and next you're a guest on Jericho's highlight reel, where you know it was always going to kick off at some point. Some of my favourite superstars to interact with in this for their dialogue alone was Muhammad Hassan, Edge and Chris Jericho. Obviously reading other folks' lines like Triple H, you could hear him in your mind whilst reading, but I feel like they managed to capture the comedic value of the other three really well in this. And it goes back to exactly what I said prior about Hassan. He comes out, and whenever you say anything in a slightly negative way, he goes off on one of his rants about how the Americans treat him badly for being an Arab American. Honestly, looking back, I just can't get over how great of a heel this guy actually was. Now that we live in a softer world, some lines you may read in this might come off a bit different now, like when Edge calls Hassan a desert do-rag wearing rookie. or when I told him to keep his turban on, which of course Hassan then uses as ammo to go on a rant. There was a few times the way Edge referred to Stacey during a few cutscenes had me thinking that wouldn't fly now, but you know what? That's the way it was then, and I wouldn't change it for the world now. I also liked how the wrestlers you come across reference the previous game's story mode. Triple H liked to remind me about our time in Evolution from the previous game along with Randy Orton. They don't just reference the previous game though, but the real life product itself. Shawn Michaels references Kane's inability to hold the WWE Championship for more than one night in 1998, or even Christian mentioning WCW's demise to Eric Bischoff, which I liked to see then as much as I do now. If you remember me previously mentioning how at the time of this game's release I was already feeling nostalgic for the years that had just passed, and this was a nice nod to me from WWE to let me know that they haven't forgotten the good times we shared together. Wrestlers aren't just true to how they sound during dialogue, but in matches too. Even though it messed me up, but seeing Eddie Guerrero cheating to get a chance at the tag titles at Survivor Series really warmed my heart up a bit if I'm honest. As much as I will praise this game's story mode for its written dialogue and the progression of the story, there was a few moments it became just a bit stale. This is also a good moment to point out, if you haven't guessed already, there is no pre-recorded lines like we had now been introduced to within the SmackDown vs Raw series over on the PS2. And I think the game could have benefited from it because some of these cutscenes do go on for a long time. At times it felt like the wrestlers were taking the longest diverted route just to get to the point they were meant to arrive at. This became really tedious with Stacy Keibler. Her involvement within the story got incredibly boring to the point I was gladly just pressing start to get to the end of these cutscenes, and thank God I did because look how long this one went on for. Now onto a nice added touch which I faulted the previous game for not having, but thankfully is present here, and that is the ability to make choices. There are multiple moments throughout your playthrough where you'll be asked to make a choice on what you want to do next. I'm really not sure how much these change things because I found if you chose one thing, then eventually you'd end up doing the other thing anyway. Like here when I got the choice of finishing my feud with Edge or go after the Intercontinental title. Edge was talking a lot of crap, so I decided to finish him off for good, but not long after this I ended up capturing the IC title anyway. Whether or not it makes that much of a difference, I like that it's there. Replayability wise, I'm not sure if it's there because as I said, I feel like you're always going to end up on the path that is pre-written for you anyways, but I like it. Another issue that has partly been solved in this game's story mode is that now you don't have to win every match, only those that require you to win to progress the story along, which I don't mind. The previous game making you beat everyone even though it has no impact on the story was pretty annoying, especially if you were dying to see the direction in which the story was taking you. Also, another thing I liked yet again was how great the belts looked in this, even more so than the first day of Reckoning. Unfortunately though, you can only see these within the story mode, and also yet again, more stock entrances for myself if I'm carrying a belt. I just want to see how my created entrance would have looked while holding one of these belts. So if you remember whilst I was covering the Create a Superstar mode, I mentioned I would come back to talking about the attribute system when I got to this section. Well, here we are. So as you progress through the story mode and win matches, you're awarded with money to spend in the game's shop zone, along with stat points just like the previous game. I would honestly suggest not spending all stat points at once as soon as you get them. Do what I done and save them up over the course of an in-game month, then spend them, and here's why. The first time I almost got myself into bother was when I found myself in a triple threat cage match against The Big Show and Rob Van Dam, with the only way of winning was to escape the cage. Almost 20 minutes I tried to win this match, but I just couldn't climb the cage fast enough in time, even with how badly beat up the other two were. I just couldn't reach the top. Thankfully I did have some attribute points saved for a rainy day, and by simply boosting my speed stats up a bit, I managed to win the match with no issues. The second time wasn't too bad, more tedious than anything else. So I found myself in a submission match against Kurt Angle. Now the build I was going for with my superstar was sheer brute force and power. This is why I neglected the speed attribute along with submission. So I did get a little worried going into this because I had literally just spent my attribute points before going into this chapter whilst also saving beforehand, so I couldn't return to a previous save. You see, if your speed stat is low, you just move a lot slower. No big deal, right? Especially if you're going for a build like I was. But if your submission stats are low, it means you can't hold a submission move for a long period of time, literally a second or two if you're lucky. This resulted in me just having to beat him to a pulp and continuously apply a submission move for a second or two, which my character could do until I eventually got angled to submit. Now if you didn't boost your speed attribute and had none to spare, then you could potentially find yourself soft locked from continuing, and that cage match comes probably around the last quarter of the game's story, meaning you'd have to start right from the beginning, and let me tell you this, I wouldn't have finished the story if I had to do that. So all in, minus the few things I didn't like or found annoying, I did enjoy my playthrough, more so than the previous game's story mode. One thing I don't really understand though is why you have to use a created superstar for this game's story mode. I felt like anyone could have been in your created superstar's shoes during my playthrough. Of course, apart from when the other superstars or yourself reference the previous game's story mode. But yeah, I think first time players would enjoy what the story has to offer here, and one I would go back and play some other time down the line. So would I recommend this game? Absolutely yes. Now I know I may have come across a bit hard when going over the gameplay, but it's still a great experience playing this. That much so, apart from the story mode, you could completely pass on the first one and come directly to this. The menu system is great, entrances look fantastic, and as much as I may have come across like I was hating the gameplay, I did actually enjoy it. It's just that it's too similar to the previous game. Greater Wrestler is a bit like what we've already seen, but the story mode was great fun in my books. It makes me wonder, if this hadn't have been a GameCube exclusive, would it be regarded as one of the greats like No Mercy and Here Comes the Pain? I genuinely think it would, because it really is a lot of fun to play. Also, for those with a PC capable of emulating, there is actually an expansion mod for this that may fix some things you might not like the sound of. For a start, it takes the base 43 playable characters all the way up to 80, with a few notable names that unfortunately weren't included in the original for whatever reason. It allows us to see wrestlers come to the ring wearing title belts with an exhibition mode, something I've never understood why you can't do anyway. Replaces the original game's soundtrack, which by the way is incredibly boring, and puts the SmackDown vs Raw 2006 one in to replace it. Attire and texture mods, removes the weapon limit in matches, and a whole heap more. I haven't had the chance to fully dive into it yet, but one day I will, and it's free too, so yeah, go check it out if you haven't already. This has been a blast going through the WWE GameCube exclusive titles. Definitely took me down memory lane, and glad I revisited some of these. Where do I go next? Who knows? Stay tuned to find out. Anyway, that brings me to the end of this video. I'd love to hear your opinions on this game down in the comments below, positive or negative. I respond to everyone and really do enjoy hearing other people's points of view on games I cover here on the channel. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, then give it a thumbs down. Either way, it lets me know what I'm doing right and what I'm doing wrong. Last but not least, if you really did enjoy this video, please hit the subscribe button. It would be much appreciated and will also help me reach a wider audience. I also have an Instagram account which I'm going to start posting on again a lot more than what I currently do, so hopefully catch you over there too. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!